Welcome to the basics of chess series. Castling is one of the most misunderstood concept in chess. While some people know some basic rules of castling, many people miss out on all the rules. Even the grandmasters are not an exception to this. Even during the actual plays, there were scenarios where grandmasters missed one of these rules. So for you to make sure that you don't miss any rules of castling, understand all the 6 rules that lead to castling. We have created an interactive tool here where you can understand all the 6 rules of castling. The first rule of castling is the king has not moved. So here, to make it simpler, we will always consider from the perspective of the white. Here when we say, as you can see, the king is in red, which means the white has moved. The white king has moved. If the king has moved, he will not be able to do castling on either side of either sides. But before we get into the details, generally castling means the king and the rook swap each other's position, but not in exact. Generally the king moves one square away and the rook takes the adjacent position. Let's look at like one of the legal castling so that like you get an idea. So now this is the king, the d square is the place for the queen. So in castling there are two types of castlings. One is king side castling and the other one is called queen side castling. The king side castling is the king goes to g file and the rook goes to f file. It is called king's side castling because this is the side of the king, and similarly this is the queen side. And also if you look at the notation, the king side castling is represented with like two O's because before the castling happens there are two empty squares between the king and the rook. Similarly for the queen side there are three empty squares and hence you have three O's which represent king side castling. So let's look at the king side castling now. And similarly, so as you can see, king came to g and rook went to the f file. And if you look at queen side castling, the king always moves one square away. So king would go to the c file and the rook would go to the d file. As you can see, this is the one. Now let us look at the rules. Now if the king has moved, right, he will not be able to castle either on king side or the queen side. Now let's consider a scenario where the king has not moved and then he will be able to castle both on king side and the queen side. Okay, so that this is the king side castling and this is queen side castling. Now let's look at the next rule. The next rule is similar to the king, the rook also should not have moved. So combining these two rules together, for the castling to happen, both the king and the rook should not have moved. In this case, since the rook has moved already, right, we will not be able to do the king side castling. So when we try to do king side castling, as you can see, this is rejected because the chosen rook has already moved. But while it avoids castling on this side, we can still castle on the queen side. Okay, so now let's try the queen side castling. As you can see, that still happens. So now here let's consider h1 rook has moved, and since this is the same thing that we discussed, because a1 has not moved, we will still be able to do the queen side castling. Okay, and similarly if the a1 rook has moved, we will not be able to do the queen side castling, but at the same time we will be able to do the king side castling. So these are the two rules which cover the basic. Now there are few more rules which are important. I think like the first 3 rules are generally like most of the people would know. The third rule is very simple, where it says that you should not have any pieces in between the king and the rook. This is pretty much straightforward. So in this case we have couple of pieces between the king and queen, so we will a king and rook, so we will not be able to do a king side castling. But since queen side is empty, we should be able to do a queen side castling. So most people stop at these first 3 rules. What separates you from the rest will be the other 3 rules. So let's look at the rule number 4. The rule number 4, the king is not currently in check. So here it doesn't matter from where, if the king is under check, right, you will not be able to do the castling. In this case we see that king is under check from the bishop, so we will not be able to do the king side castling or the queen side castling, because here it doesn't matter because the king is in check, so queen side or king side doesn't matter. But whereas let's say the check is resolved, now our king is not under check, then we will be able, because there are empty squares and both the rooks have not moved till now, we will be able to do king side castling as well as queen side castling. So most many people would know about rule 4 also. The actual changes or where it differentiates is rule number 5 and rule number 6. So rule number 5 is, now let's say the king has not moved, the rooks have not moved, and the squares between king and rooks are empty, and the king is not currently under check. So we have successfully, in this position, we have successfully made sure that all four rules are passed. But in spite of that, here we will not be able to do the king side castling. We'll not be able to do the king side castling because for the castling to happen, king has to pass through these squares, which are e1, f1 and g1. But when the king tries to pass through the f1 square, we can see that it is actually being attacked by the bishop, which means that during the castling the king will be attacked, hence the king will not be able to castle on the king side. But as you can see here on the queen side, there are no pieces which are attacking these three square, and hence you will be able to do the castling on the queen side. Let's try that. As you can see, the queen side castling was successful. Now one more rule is the king does not land on a attacked square. So this is kind of like an extension of rule 5 itself. If you consider even the ending position, right, then you can consider this is very similar to the rule 5. As you can see here, if the castling happens, king would be in g1 and rook would be in f1. But we will not be able to castle on the king side because the g1 square is being guarded by the queen here. So let's try doing the castling on the king side. As you can see here, we will not be able to do it because the king does not land on the attacked square, which is g1. But as you can see here, queen side is clear. So on queen side, we will still be able to do the castling. So these are the 6 rules which will help you identify all the scenarios of castling, so that whenever you are playing chess next time, you can castle with confidence. And at the same time, in case if your opponent is missing something, you will be able to call the arbiter and make sure that it's the illegal moves are not played. Thank you for watching this.